whispers, and today I'm going to do a video about something that's always fascinated me, and that is coincidences, or strange coincidences more to the point, and synchronicity. And people have said that I tend to cause coincidence wherever I go, and the more that people notice it, the more it freaks them out. I quite like it. It's always fascinated me. So I found a list of 20 strange coincidences, and I thought I would read them out today if I can fit all 20 in. And also I have a sore throat, so I'm eating a throat lozenge. I know that some people seem to like that when people have a candy in their mouth at the same time as whispering, so I thought I would give it a go. So here we go, 20 strange coincidences. Number 1, James Dean's car crash. In September 1955, James Dean was killed in a horrific car accident whilst he was driving his sports car, a Porsche. After the crash, the car was seen as very unlucky. When the car was towed away from the accident scene and taken to a garage, the engine slipped out and fell onto a mechanic, shattering both of his legs. Eventually the engine was bought by a doctor who put it into his racing car and was killed shortly afterwards during a race. Another racing driver in the same race was killed in his car, which had James Dean's drive shaft fitted to it. When James Dean's Porsche was later repaired, the garage it was in was destroyed by a fire. Later the car was displayed in Sacramento, but it fell off of its mount and broke a teenager's hip. In Oregon, the trailer that the car was mounted on slipped from its tow bar and smashed through the front of a shop. Finally, in 1959, the car mysteriously broke into 11 pieces while it was sitting on steel supports. That's strange. Coincidence number 2. Falling baby. In Detroit, sometime in the 1930s, a young, if incredibly careless mother must have been eternally grateful to a man named Joseph Figlock. As Figlock was walking down the street, the mother's baby fell from a high window onto Figlock. The baby's fall was broken, and both the man and the baby were unharmed. A stroke of luck on its own, but a year later, the very same baby fell from the very same window onto poor unsuspecting Joseph Figlock as he again was passing beneath, and again they both survived the event. Number 3. A billy that reached his destiny. Henry Cyclin thought that he had dodged fate. In 1883, he broke off a relationship with a girlfriend who, out of distress, committed suicide. The girl's brother was so enraged that he hunted down Cyclin and shot him. The brother, believing he had killed Cyclin, then turned his gun on himself and took his own life. But Cyclin had not been killed. The bullet, in fact, had only grazed his face and then lodged in a tree. Cyclin surely thought himself a lucky man. Some years later, however, Cyclin decided to cut down the large tree which still had the bullet in it. The task seemed formidable, so that he decided to blow it up with a few sticks of dynamite. The explosion propelled the bullet into Cyclin's head, killing him. Spooky. Number 4. Twin boys, twin lives. The stories of identical twins, nearly identical lives, are often astonishing. Perhaps brothers also divorced their wives and married other women, both named Betty, and they both owned dogs which they named Toy. 40 years after their childhood separation, the two men were reunited to share their amazingly similar lives. That's cool. I like stories about twins as well. I have twin big sisters, and like they both knew when the other one was in labour or when they were sick and stuff, and I've always thought that was really cool. 5. Just like Edgar Allan Poe's book. In the 19th century, the famous horror writer Edgar Allan Poe wrote a book called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. It was about 4 survivors of a shipwreck who were in an open boat for many days before they decided to kill and eat the cabin boy, whose name was Richard Parker. Some years later, in 1884, the yawl Minonet foundered with only 4 survivors who were in an open boat for many days. Eventually, the 3 senior members of the crew killed and ate the cabin boy. The name of the boy was Richard Parker. Oh, that's creepy. Number 6. In 2002, 70-year-old twin brothers had died within hours of one another after separate accidents on the same road in northern Finland. The first of the twins died when he was hit by a lorry while riding his bike in Rai 600, I don't know if that's how you pronounce that, 600 kilometres north of the capital, Helsinki. He died just 1.5 kilometres from the spot where his brother was killed. This is simply a historic coincidence, although the road is a busy one. Accidents don't occur every day. Police officer Maria Lena Hutala told readers, forgive my pronunciation of this, by the way, I don't know anything about how to pronounce this. It made my hair stand on end when I heard the two were brothers and identical twins at that. It came to mind that perhaps someone from upstairs had had a say in this, she said. And it says at the bottom note, a reader wrote us after reading local newspaper and said your story about the Finnish twins is missing some details. The first brother was killed by a lorry while riding his bike and crossing Highway 8. He apparently didn't notice the lorry in the snow blizzard. The second brother was killed by a lorry only 2 hours later while riding his bike and crossing Highway 8. The second brother couldn't have been aware of the first brother's death as the police were still trying to identify the victim. Excuse me, I have to get another cough drop. Sorry if that's noisy, guys. The packet makes a good sound though. Anyway, sorry. Number 7. Joseph Ainer was a fairly well-known portrait painter in the 19th century in Austria, who apparently was quite an unhappy fellow. He several times attempted suicide. His first attempt was at the age of 18, when he tried to hang himself, but was interrupted by the mysterious appearance of a Capuchin monk. At age 22, he again tried to hang himself, but was again saved from the act by the very same monk. 8 years later, his death was ordained by others who sentenced him to the gallows for his political activities. Once again, his life was saved by the intervention of the same monk. At age 68, Eicher finally succeeded in suicide, a pistol doing the trick. His funeral ceremony dollars in winnings. The police demanded the original $600 pass on to Fallon's next of kin, only to discover that the new player turned out to be Fallon's son, who had not seen his father in 7 years. 9. When Norman Mailer began his novel Barbary Shore, there were no plans to have a Russian spy as a character. As he worked on it, he introduced a Russian spy in the US as a minor character. As the work progressed, the spy became the dominant character in the novel. After the novel was completed, the US Immigration Service arrested a man who lived just 1 floor above Mailer in the same apartment building. He was Colonel Rudolph Abel, alleged to be the top Russian spy working in the US at the time. I don't think that's that much of a coincidence. I suppose it's a little bit. Number 10. Mark Twain was born on the day of the appearance of Halley's Comet in 1835 and died on the day of his next appearance in 1910. He himself predicted this in 1909 when he said, "I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835. It is coming again next year and I expect to go out with it." 11. In the 1920s, 3 Englishmen were travelling separately by train throughout Peru. At the time of their introduction, they were the only 3 men in the railroad car. Their introductions were more surprising than they could have imagined. One man's last name was Bingham, the second man's last name was Powell, the third man announced that his last name was Bingham Powell. None were related in any way. 12. Oh, I know this one. I thought this was spooky. In 1975, while riding a moped in Bermuda, a man was accidentally struck and killed by a taxi. 1 year later, this man's brother was killed in the very same way. In fact, he was riding the very same moped, and to stretch the odds even further, he was struck by the very same taxi, driven by the same driver, and even carrying the very same passenger. That's spooky. 13. In 1953, television reporter Irv Kupcinet was in London to cover the coronation of Elizabeth II. On one of the doors in his room at the Savoy, he found some items that, by their identification, belonged to a man named Harry Hannon. Coincidentally, Harry Hannon, a basketball star with the famed Harlem Globetrotters, was a good friend of Kupcinet's. But the story has yet another twist. Just 2 days later, before he could tell Hannon of his lucky discovery, Kupcinet received a letter from Hannon. In the letter, Hannon told Kupcinet that while he was staying in the Hotel Meuse in Paris, he found in a drawer a tie with Kupcinet's name on it. 14. While on a business trip sometime in the late 1950s, Mr. George T. Bryson stopped and registered at the Brown Hotel in Louisville, Kentucky. After signing the register and being given his key to room 307, he stopped by the mail desk to see if any letters had arrived for him. Indeed, there was a letter, the mail girl told him, and handed him an envelope addressed to Mr. George T. Bryson, room 307. This wouldn't be so odd, except that the letter was not for him, but for room 307's just previous occupant, another man named George T. Bryson. 50. John and Arthur Moorforth were twins who lived about 80 miles apart in Great Britain. On the evening of May the 22nd, 1975, both fell severely ill from chest pains. The families of both men were completely unaware of the other's illness. Both men were rushed to several hospitals at approximately the same time, and both died of heart attacks shortly after their arrival. ship, the Titanian. Panic-stricken, he sounded the warning. The ship stopped just in time. A huge iceberg loomed out of the fog directly in their path. The Titanian was saved. 17. While American novelist Anne Parrish was browsing bookstores in Paris in the 1920s, she came upon a book that was one of her childhood favourites, Jack Frost and Other Stories. She picked up the book and showed it to her husband, telling him of the book she fondly remembered as a child. Her husband took the book, opened it, and on the flyleaf found the inscription, Anne Parrish, 209 North Weber Street, Colorado Springs. It was Anne's very own book. 18. In 1805, French writer Emile Deschamps was treated to some plum pudding by the stranger Monsieur de Fortescue. 10 years later, he encountered plum pudding on the menu of a Paris restaurant and wanted to order some, but the waiter told him that the last dish had already been served to another customer. It turned out to be de Fortescue. Many years later, in 1832, Emile Deschamps was at dinner and was once again offered plum pudding. He recalled the earlier incident and told his friends that only de Fortescue was missing to make the setting complete, and in the same instant the now senile de Fortescue entered the room. That is weird. Senile. The now senile de Fortescue entered the room. 19. In Monza, Italy, King Umberto I went to a small restaurant for dinner, accompanied by his aide-de-camp, General Emilio Bonziavaglia. When the owner took King Umberto's order, the king noticed that he and the restaurant owner were virtual doubles in face and in build. Both men began discussing the striking resemblance between each other and found many more similarities. Both men were born on the same day of the same year, March the 14th, 1844. Both men had been born in the same town. Both men married a woman with the same name, Margherita. The restaurant owner opened his restaurant on the same day that King Umberto was crowned King of Italy. On the 29th of July 1900, King Umberto was informed that the restaurateur had died that day in a mysterious shooting accident. As he expressed his regret, he was then assassinated by an anarchist in the crowd. Spooky. And coincidence number 20. When King Louis XVI of France was a child, he was warned by an astrologer to always be on guard on the 21st day of each month. Louis was so terrified by this that he never did business on this day. Unfortunately, Louis was not always on his guard. On June the 21st, 1791, following the French Revolution, Louis and his queen were arrested in Varennes whilst trying to escape France. On September the 21st, 1791, France abolished the institution of royalty and proclaimed itself a republic. Finally, on January the 21st,